Welcome to Dying to Know, where we open up about everything that comes with losing a loved one.
Because the only thing that's worse than death is not being able to talk about it.
We're your Bereavement Babes, Leah and Rachel, and today we're doing an interview. So Rachel, today we have another guest and doing another interview. Are you excited?
I am excited because, well, you can tell we're in a new location.
I know. Today we'll be talking to Erica Hill.
Mm-hmm.
She's the founder of Sparrow Funeral Home. It's a contemporary funeral home, so we'll learn some ins and outs about funeral homes today.
I'm very excited too.
Yeah. Let's get into it. Hi Erica, welcome to Dying to Know.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, thanks for hosting us here in your beautiful space.
Yes, this is our first, not in our studio location or interview, so it's exciting, to be somewhere new.
Well, welcome to Sparrow.
Yes, thank you for having us. So we'll jump right in. If you could just tell us a little bit about your background and how you got started at Sparrow.
So I was a director and a producer, did a lot of interview-based stuff like you two are doing. But also through the years, I've had a lot of friends and family die and would go to funerals that were in funeral homes that were really depressing, didn't feel like they reflected the person that I loved, and just kind of always left with the question of why does it have to be like that? And then a friend that I had through work, she and I were talking one day, and she said she always wanted to open a funeral home. And it was like I got hit by lightning. Left to my own devices, I don't think I would have opened a funeral home. That happened. It took a number of years, probably another 5 years from that conversation, to have Sparrow become a reality. She and I were originally going to be partners. She got a huge job that took her to California. I was here. I ended up having the business partner that I now have is a woman that I knew our kids went to school together.
Oh, wow.
Nice. I'm glad that your friend was able to convince you to open a funeral home. I know I begged Rachel to do this podcast. So.
I know. It takes a friend to kind of help you take the lead.
Yeah. How long did it take her to convince you to take this venture?
Well, she didn't convince me.
Oh, okay.
We're at the lunch and said she always wanted to open a funeral home. And I said yes, and it needs to be like this and this and this.
Okay.
And she's like, "Are you serious?" I said, "I've never been more serious in my life." We worked on it together for about 6 months, a different iteration than what Sparrow is. And then, as I said, she got a job in California and left. And I just kind of kept coming back to the concept. And then Jennifer, who's my business partner, I had sent her the business plan to read. Mm-hmm. And she said, "When you're ready for investors, let me know." I didn't really know what that meant because that can mean a lot of different things. But long and short of it is she ended up becoming my investor and partner. And here we are. 2.5. So we opened 2.5 years ago.
Okay.
That initial conversation with Nancy was probably 6 years ago. It's a long time of just thinking about it. And then once Jennifer and I decided to go for it, it went pretty quickly. We signed a lease in May of 2021.
I know you mentioned that the Sparrow we're in today went through many iterations. And then initially when your first friend had asked you, you were saying you had felt the feeling of other funeral homes, the way they smelled, they looked, and just be in attendance at other funeral homes, how it didn't represent the person that you lost. So how important was it for you to curate this environment? And then how do families feel coming in here in this different environment of a funeral home?
So what it looked like, smelled like, felt like was incredibly important to me. And I really wanted it to reflect the world that I have lived in. And I think, reflect now.
Yeah.
So I wanted a place that was warm and inviting and for all people, not just people who want something different and unique. Mm-hmm. And I think that we were able to achieve that. And I say this all the time, but one of the sort of misconceptions about Sparrow is that we're only for families that want something different.
Yeah.
We have a lot of really traditional funerals here. The only thing is we're not in a traditional feeling or looking funeral home. Mm-hmm. And I always say that I get so much gratification and feel so good when a family who is maybe very religious or very, culturally traditional is grateful that we exist and grateful that they could have it here, even though, it might be a 2-day viewing and, very traditional kind of thing, but just being in a place that doesn't feel so heavy on top of what they're already going through, people are very grateful for. And the best compliment I can get is, why isn't every funeral home like this?
Yeah, even walking in today, like as we set up for this, it was like the music was playing and just like the ambiance, like nothing felt scary about being here. I feel like I had to recently go back to like where I held my dad's funeral, and it's just like there is a certain smell and like atmosphere that you get. So walking in here just felt so light and airy and made it comfortable to come in and do an interview, and like it felt like a safe space right away. I guess when you have people who may not know that Sparrow like does more unique services, are their first what are their first reactions like? Like, do they get nervous? Are they more happy? Like,
I think that for some families, it takes a minute to understand that it depends on what this room is that we're sitting in is set up like. Well, I'll start there. So if this room is set up the way you guys walked into it today, where it is a very traditional setup, it's very easy for them to see that this isn't some weird, scary place.
yeah.
Or just, it can suit and fulfill their needs.
Yeah.
And then, there's a family that we work with recently, traditional, who asked a lot of questions about like, well, how does this work? And the response they kept getting back was, well, what's important to you? How do you want it to be? What was your person like? What would make it feel more like they're present? And I think that for some people, different just means our space, or different could mean that the music, you guys mentioned the music playing, maybe the playlist is a playlist that they put together. So different or unique doesn't have to mean something way outside of the box. It might mean that you're taking down our art and you're hanging up photos of your loved one all over our space.
Nice.
Or that we set up a table that's filled with memorabilia of your person. So, sometimes it's just small things that make it feel more personal, and but still very much reflect the customs of the people who come in.
I love that you asked that, like what's important to you, because I feel like you kind of sit there and get a catalog of like what you can pick at a typical one, and I feel like not that people don't ask you, but you don't get to really curate like what exactly you want. So that question is just so beautiful, and to like know that you have like endless options for someone who is everything to you.
Yeah, and I think that it's that. I understand why it is like that. Like, I don't mean to knock what exists. I understand it. That's the way that it's been done. And I think if for somebody who's grown up in this industry, if that's what your family has done for 3 generations and it's worked, it's a little like, well, why do I need to fix the thing that is working? Myself and some others who are now coming up in this industry, we don't come from a funeral background. So I think we bring different perspectives. And, having been in production for a long time, I know that anything can make anything happen. Right? Sometimes it's a matter of time and money, but you can truly make anything happen. So like we had a memorial that was set up kind of a Buddhist style, and we didn't have candles, and people sat kind of around in a circle using the benches to sit on. So again, it's like repurposing the space differently for every person if they want that.
Yeah. This seems to be a very people first environment, like for the loved one that we've lost, and then for the family that's continuing to plan their like end of life service or celebration for the person. And I just wanted to ask you or talk to you more about the range of services that you offer. So we know that the traditional burial or cremation, but you also offer green burials and exit parties. And I even saw something like aquamation. If you could just share some of the unique experiences or plans that you have here for families.
So there's all different kinds of disposition. So you can have cremation, you can have burial. Green burial has been going on for as long as we've been human. But it's sort of been repackaged in like all Jewish people, Muslim people have green burial. So essentially just means you're buried without any metal, and you're not embalmed, So we support green burials, whether that's in a certified green cemetery, or you could technically have a green burial in a traditional cemetery. It just means your person was not embalmed, their casket has no metal in it. And then there's new types of disposition that have been created. In New York, they're not all legalized here, so we have different companies that we partner with out of state. So aquamation is, instead of a fire, it's cremation by liquid. So it's, I think the technical name is alkaline hydrolysis.
Okay.
So we had someone who opted that for their loved one, and we partnered with a company called Enswell down in North Carolina, and they're a great young couple who are kind of doing what we're doing, and they started out as kind of aquamation only, and now they've expanded to be a full funeral home offering a lot of green choices. And then there's also terramation, also known as human composting.
I've heard about that one. I'm
Yeah.
interested in that one. Okay.
And so that is when your body is broken down and turned into dirt. So you can either donate your dirt to a park or like a national forest or park, or you can get your dirt back and give it out to people and use it to plant stuff in your garden or whatever. There's nowhere in New York that offers that. There's 2 places in Washington State. There's a Colorado company.
Nice. So it's really about partnership and like finding these people who do these other things.
I know. No, I was actually going to ask the same thing. Like, how do you stay up to date of like what new is going on, or like, is there a network that's kind of like always interacting with each other, saying?
Yeah, I mean, there's funeral conferences.
Oh.
Many.
Makes sense.
You guys should go to one probably.
Are they open to the?
Yeah, anyone can register and go.
Okay.
I mean, you have to pay, but it's
But you don't need like to be a funeral.
no,
gotta pay to
anybody
play.
can go.
Okay.
So there's people that go there that talk about the things that they offer. And it just depends on what kind of conference you go to. Like there's a green burial conference, and that's all about everything green. There's one that's all about cremation. There's the National Funeral Directors one, which is kind of the biggest, I guess. That's happening in October in New Orleans. But they always have like a vendor floor. And so you'll have people selling everything from aquamation equipment to urns to limos, hearses, whatever. Software, lots of software. A lot of developments happening in software.
Okay.
So you can go to there and you learn. There's different publications that come out that you can subscribe to. And then I would say, honestly, a lot of people we find each other on social media. So
I mean, yeah.
Instagram, LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And then often like somebody, like let's say I know someone at the NFTA and they really believe in what we're doing, and they're like, oh, you really need to meet this person. And all of a sudden they've introduced you to like 10 different people. Or I'll read about something that I think is interesting and I reach out to the person doing it, and the same, vice versa.
Yeah.
So it's kind of everything, a little word of mouth, a little participating in the industry events.
Yeah. Networking is key, no matter what industry.
Yeah, it's kind of that.
Okay, like who you know. I know we spoke about you being the founder here, and then also me and Rachel doing the podcast. Like grief is a cloud over our lives. I don't want to say a cloud, but it's like involved in our lives, like threaded through our lives. So just interested to hear about you, like expound on when you have a family here. How do you get them? I know you talked about it a little bit about having them select what type of service. I'm just curious how you direct those conversations more, and then also for people who are trying to have that conversation with someone still alive, do you have any advice for them on how to like guide the conversation to make it a little easier for planning?
Sure. Yeah. So in New York, I'm not licensed.
Okay.
So most of those conversations are actually, I'm giving you secondhand knowledge.
Okay.
I'm not necessarily having the conversations with those families. It would be a funeral director.
Yeah.
I am licensed in California. So that's the other thing. Every state is very different about the thresholds to get a license to be a funeral director, with New York being one of the toughest.
Oh.
So
Do you know why that is, New York?
New York is the hardest almost all around.
Okay. Well,
So here you have to go to mortuaries, regardless of what your school was prior. You have to go to mortuary school for 2 years to get an associate's degree, specifically in mortuary science. Then you have to pass the state boards, and then you have to pass the national boards. And you have to learn how to embalm. So the license is a dual license.
Okay.
The embalming is the thing that has stopped me from going, because I can't even like look when they take blood out of my arm.
Wow.
I can't get past thinking about having to poke somebody.
Okay.
You know, and again, every state's different. I mean, Colorado, I'm sure you've read about some of the horrors that have happened in Colorado. You don't have to have a license to open a funeral home in Colorado, but I think they're going to change that now.
Yeah.
But anyway, to answer your real question, I think that, I mean, for me, I believe personally that the more we talk about death and the more we talk about the losses that we've had and the more we talk about what we want and what's important to us, the lighter our lives become a little bit. And you talked about grief being a cloud. I would say grief maybe isn't a cloud, but it's something that never leaves, right? So if you guys have both experienced big losses, you know that every day is different. Sometimes every hour is different. And you probably also know that with time, it shifts. So you could go a whole week or a whole month not thinking about the loss that you had, or not being sad about it at least. And then out of nowhere, you get hit with, you know, crying or feeling really low, you know, whatever those feelings are. So I think the more that we can normalize talking about that stuff, the better. And for me, I think that if, to answer the question about how to make it easier, I always like to say that I think of planning a funeral like planning a wedding.
Yes.
And we live in a society where we celebrate everything, like any excuse to have a party and celebrate. The one thing we don't want to talk about or think about is our end party, which, like, newsflash,
It's happening.
every single person is going to die.
Yeah.
It's not like some are going to escape
Exactly.
that outcome. So I think if starting at much younger ages, you can just talk about, like, even with your friends, like, if something were to happen to me, I would love to be cremated, or I don't want to be cremated. I want a green burial and wildflowers put on top, planted on top of me.
Yeah.
Or I don't want a funeral, but I want a giant party. Or I want a funeral and I want all the pomp and circumstance and I want to have 4 priests there, or like whatever your thing is. I think the more you can talk about that in a way that it's not dark and ominous and scary, the easier it becomes for everybody and the more normalized. And then it's just so much healthier for everyone when the time comes. Because like you two are quite young to have had losses, but we'll have people who are in their 50s and 60s or 70s and have a parent die and they've never had to think about planning a funeral. And they don't really know what to do unless they are religious, and then there's a guide for them. So I don't know, I just feel like in a society where we talk about everything, we're open about everything, why is this, it used to be decades ago, no one wanted to talk about cancer. It was like the C word. I feel like death is kind of coming out of those shadows. And I think COVID probably had a lot to do with that, because you kind of couldn't avoid sort of death that was happening everywhere, and kind of felt like everybody knew somebody or someone who knew somebody. So maybe that's where the big shift really started happening, or when. But yeah, I always say, like, if you can make it kind of lighter, and there's games now like the end of life deck that you can get and ask questions, and
There's a game.
And I was like, we need to look into
I
that.
didn't know that. Okay.
Some, I think, for people who are actively in hospice, dying, and I think others just for, like, if we were going to play at a bar.
Okay,
But I think, like, if you can keep it like that,
Light like that,
that it's just an easy entry. It's also why we have the shop.
Yeah.
Because I felt like with the shop, I've had stores before in the Catskills, and I love retail, and I've worked in retail. Like, I never worked in restaurants. I was always in retail. But it's an easy entry in, whether you just live in the neighborhood and you want to come buy a candle or a card and maybe have a conversation about death, and maybe not at all. But again, it's much easier to walk through a shop door than who's going to walk through the funeral home door just because they're curious what's going on. Nobody. Right? So, it's also why we do events, to try to bring people in who, might be curious about what's happening in here, and if there's an event that doesn't seem too dark or overwhelming.
Yeah.
And then they come in and they have the same reaction like you guys, like, oh, it's really nice in here.
Yeah, we actually knew someone who did the event too, and they were like,
Oh, you did? Oh, okay.
Yeah, Christina Lee, who actually helped us with our copy and intros for this podcast.
Shout out to Christina.
Yeah.
All right. Well, there you go. Okay. But, so just, again, like trying to think about ways to get people through the door that isn't maybe death specific.
Yeah.
So
I like how you mentioned like starting the conversation from anywhere, like even casually at a bar. Like I know Rachel's even mentioned like, when I die, I want Twinkle to have my phone. Like she has to read my text messages, like little tidbits that like now I know that. So like God forbid if something happens and I'm like, Twinkle, we got to get this phone to her. Like you have to drop those hints or be able to be more open about it. It feels so serious sometimes to like, we need to sit down and talk about end of life. But I think those tidbits and even the card game that you were telling us about that we definitely need to get our hands on to facilitate those conversations. It's important.
And again, like it doesn't have to be dark and ominous. It could be kind of funny and fun. And I'm not making light of somebody dying, but just again to, I've had people in my life at all ages die. So, peers from my high school through to now, and then younger people that I've known as I've gotten older who have died, and not having those conversations. I mean, I've been apologized to now by 3 families who have said, I know so-and-so wouldn't have wanted this, but like I didn't know what else to do. And that shouldn't really be where we're at.
Yeah.
Right?
No, because we've even said that too, where you have such a short time period to make all these decisions that I've like felt where I'm like, I kind of wish like we could have done this a little bit just differently for my dad, because like what if he wanted that, but it's such a short period and emotions are so high that if you don't have a playbook, you don't really know.
Right. So if you start your playbook now, and even if it doesn't happen for another 50 years, you're going to carry some of those people forward. And then if there's a way to, there are different ways to sort of solidify some of those ideas, then it just leaves that playbook for who's ever left when the time comes, whether you're 50, 70, or 90, to really feel solid in what your decisions are. And it relieves any guilt or questions from the people left behind. Like kind of like, I know that my dad would have loved this, or I feel my dad here because like this is what he wanted. And obviously it's never going to be perfect because nothing is, but I think having a strong sense of kind of what direction something should go in
is definitely helpful.
Yeah. So I highly encourage young people like you guys and your friends to, make it a fun party game or whatever.
Yeah, no, I love that advice, because I think it's what we do need to do. And that's even just the goal of this little podcast, is just to try and make it a little more comfortable for people to start talking about what's going on, especially as we're watching our parents get older and they are not always comfortable with anything, I feel like, at this point.
No, and to be fair, like my parents, same. My parents did not want to talk about what they wanted. And it wasn't until my mom got sick. My mom got sick and died very quickly in like 2.5 weeks. It was a perfect death for her, like perfect.
Wow.
I love my mom and I wish obviously I had more time, but like perfect.
Yeah.
But she once she realized what was happening, she was very open about it. And then it allowed my father to talk about it while she was still alive, so that when my father got sick a few years later, I already knew what he wanted. Nothing. And it was all very basic and simple, but still the conversation, thankfully because of her, with my dad was just completely easy, and I knew what he wanted. Again, he just wanted to be cremated, and he wanted to be, do you guys know that movie with Jack Nicholson and oh my God, I
probably don't
always have to, it's called like, it's like 2 old guys that go, one of them's terminally ill and they go traveling around the world. It's Morgan Freeman and Jack Nicholson. So you have to watch it, especially if you're
Like
into
they have a
bucket
movie
list.
one.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Bucket list.
I know
bucket list.
Yeah, and they were squirming to say something. I'm like, I don't know any movie.
Okay. It's called The Bucket List, and my dad loved that movie, and one of them wants to have his ashes put in a chock full of nuts coffee can, and that's what my dad said. He goes,
Yeah.
and I hadn't seen the movie either, by the way.
Okay.
And he goes, well, forget it. It won't make sense. And I said, no, just tell me.
Yeah.
I said, no, just put me in the coffee can. Then I watched the movie, and I was like, oh, okay. My dad dies. I'm like, I don't really want to put my dad in a coffee can. But so I had an artist that we had a lot of mutual friends who I didn't really know, but I reached out to her. Our kids knew each other. I reached out to her, and she created a ceramic version of the chock full of nuts, and she personalized it with my dad's name, and he loved
That's
the
amazing.
Brooklyn Dodgers that became the LA Dodgers, so she did a nod to that. So my dad's, some of his ashes are in a chock full of nuts coffee can.
That's amazing.
That's amazing.
But again, like that happened because my mom is dying. She's talking about what she wants. So my dad starts talking about what he wants. There's the roadmap.
There's it. Yeah.
You know, and it's like a little thing, but it,
Yeah.
and by the way, my mom doesn't even have an urn because I didn't know what to put her in because she didn't get that far.
Yeah.
And my dad went to the crematory that he used, and for what the price that he paid, he could pick an urn off of a shelf, like for, whatever he paid, he got something off of that shelf. And he just picked the blue one because she loved blue.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it was so ugly, I took her out of it. And he died. I couldn't keep it in my house.
Why would you want it? You're like, I don't like this.
So, I'm still 2 years in struggling what to stick my mother in.
Okay. Look, it happens. It's a process. It is a process.
I might make her into, have you guys seen the Parting Stones rocks?
Oh, it's like a stone that comes apart? Or-
No,
Oh.
you can have rocks made with your loved one's
Yes.
ashes. So I
love
might do that with both
Okay.
of their ashes.
Wow, that's creative.
I guess I know with us, and like, I mean, you're definitely working deeper in grief and loss and all that. And grief is not linear, I think, as you said before. So do you ever have moments where it's just a lot? Like, do you have, I guess, or self-care advice and treatments, like when it just is starting to feel like too much, where you get to step back?
Yeah, like
or,
when do you decompress? What does that look like?
Yeah.
Wrong person to ask. I would say that I'm not so good at self-care, and especially we also have a smaller business in Los Angeles, which is quite busy, so I oversee both. So it gets to be a lot. I mean, for me, if I'm in Los Angeles, self-care looks like I go to I've been sober for a very long time, and so I'll go to a meeting that's on Sundays that is physically on the beach.
Oh, nice. Okay.
And if the weather's nice, I'll stay and spend the day at the
Yeah.
beach. Like that, the beach is self-care for me.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay. You scared me. I wanted you to have some self-care.
There's that. And then, my back hurts, so I'm going to go get a
massages.
massage.
Yeah.
But it's hard. And I think that I was saying, we had a funeral here on Saturday, and it was with families that you work with, it's not your grief, it's not your person. So
Yeah.
I think I have found that it's easy to sort of separate from that and not really be affected by it. I mean, you can certainly empathize that it's sad, and different deaths are maybe sadder than others, depending. But it's very rarely that, for myself, that I really get like hit by something. And but every now and then you do, and I don't fully know why. It's not like it's because it mirrors a death I experienced, but maybe it's I'm a mom, so every now and then it's like the loss of somebody's child. But when that happens, like I'll just sit in the office and cry a little bit, and, and even like the funeral that we had this past Saturday, again, I don't know why, but this particular death, it was a younger person in his 40s. It really hit me. But I made a point of like talking to his sister and his mom and sharing that with both of them and saying, I've just really felt this loss, and I don't know him, but I will carry him with me. And like I genuinely mean that. And so I think it's a combination of stuff. I think being able to vocalize that and not be embarrassed or feel like somehow I'm putting more grief on top of that person.
I got you, yeah.
That helps a little bit. But yeah, I'd say the beach on a Sunday is.
No, I mean, that sounds like a perfect.
I mean, that's my happy place. So
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, I can.
But
I
it's
can
hard.
relate.
Like, it's a really, really hard business.
Yeah.
I can.
And with not a lot of, you don't get a lot of time off. So.
Gotcha. Okay. As we wrap up today in our interview, is there anything you would like to leave our listeners with? Any advice or last comments? And then also share where people can find you. Or the business. You're not giving your personal information. But if they're interested in doing some end of life planning and using Sparrow, where they could find you, and just any last words you would like to share.
Sure. I mean, we're online at www.sparrowny.com. They can find us online.
Okay.
Obviously, we're on Instagram. At this point in my life, to have found a new career that I feel has taken all the things I've done in my life and brought them together, I feel very grateful for that, as hard as it can be sometimes. But I feel like I have the design part that I love. I love telling stories, and now I feel like I get to help people tell stories just in a different way. So it just all kind of coalesced and came together, and I really like being of service is a huge part of my life, and I think, working with families is being of service. So I don't know, I love what I do, as exhausting as it can be sometimes. I feel like I really found my place, and grateful that I can say that, because I've done a lot of other stuff in my life. So I don't know.
No, I think that was
awesome.
great.
I know. I'm
Especially
like,
the
do
fact
I know what I
about
wanna
telling
do?
somebody's story. Like, I wouldn't have thought of a service or a celebration of life at the end of someone's life. But you're right, it does tell a story. Like how you were saying, you can empathize with those who have had losses, but just the funeral you had on Saturday where you felt touched by the young man. Like, I'm going to carry him, because you probably felt, his life through his family and like the celebration that they chose.
Yeah, and and again, like, they celebrated him in a way that I would not choose for my person, because it doesn't resonate with me. But I think, to your point, spending a little time with his mother and his sisters and talking to them, and when they were here at the funeral home, and reading, his mom wrote a letter that was in the program, and I don't know, it just but it's a privilege, right, to help do that. I think one other thing I would like to encourage people, just like we talked about, how talking about death in a way that's not so scary is really encouraging those with a terminal illness to have their funeral while they're still alive. And I have been in situations where I planned something like that without realizing that's what I planned, and I saw how much it meant to her. And then I saw how much it meant to the community left behind, that people who would never have gotten to see her again because she was sick in the hospital, and people are so scared of going to a hospital, and I am posing, I didn't know her that well, but to be able to show up as a group where all of a sudden, whether it's 50 people, 100 people, 25 people, you're not just one person going in to see somebody. It sort of takes that pressure off, and you can feel like you were able to show up for them. And they saw you, even if it was from across the room, and even if you only kind of said hello and nodded. I don't know. It was a really, really beautiful thing. She died knowing how much she was loved, and again, like, this community of people felt like they got to show up for her. And then a guy who I used to work with had ALS, and he had moved down home, which was down south, but he came here about, I'd say, 4 months before he died. He had some artwork in an art exhibit, and I went, and he was at the point he couldn't communicate anymore other than using a iPad, with his eyes. Eye tracker, I guess is what it's called. And it hadn't been brought up with him. So when I was there, my daughter was small at the time, and I couldn't stay for very long. So all I could do was go over and kind of squeeze his arm and smile and, look him in the eyes. Like, that was the only way we could really communicate. And I said a few things to him, and then I had to leave. And he emailed me later, how frustrated he was that he didn't have his tracker. But just the fact that I was able to show up like that in a way that I didn't have to get on a plane and fly to where he was. If that hadn't have happened, that hadn't have been organized, he would have died and I wouldn't have seen him in, 4 years or whatever, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that just giving yourself the grace of not worrying about maybe what you look like or how you're presenting, but just letting people love on you is huge.
It is.
So that's what an exit party here means, and I really wish somebody would take us up on it.
Yeah.
You never know, this could reach somebody who needs an exit party. Yeah.
We can rename it if they want it called something else. That's okay.
Yeah.
You guys
I feel like
put
people don't even
first.
think about it.
Yeah,
So
you
it's
don't
nice
think of
to
that.
Add that into the universe that you can do anything you want.
Yeah.
It's like your life.
Yeah. Instead of waiting till you're dead.
Yeah.
And then all these people show up and you don't get to see them. And then the conversation is like, oh, man, like I hadn't seen so-and-so
Yeah.
since I ran into him at the, barber or at the
Exactly.
gas station or down the block. And instead you all get to show up and like say hi.
Yeah.
And-
It's kind of like that had I known. Like, had I known it was the last Christmas, I would have done more. But like now you actually do know. So what can you do?
Right.
And show up.
Yeah. So I really, really would encourage people in that situation to try to, and I'm sure it's terrifying too.
Yeah.
Like, so I get it, but I've seen how much it has meant to the people who are dying. So.
Yeah. Well, Erica, thank you so much for the conversation today. And not only just for the conversation, just for the space that you are creating for the community and the families that use your business. It doesn't feel stiff here. It does feel very relaxed. It doesn't smell like one. And you're really like telling a story about someone's life through the services that you offer. So thank you for the work that you are doing for the community.
Thank
it's
you.
really
Welcome.
much
And
appreciated.
thank you for having us here today and let us take
I
over your
know.
space for this.
You're very welcome. I love when new people come to Sparrow.
Yeah.
I feel like the more people come, the more people will know about it.
Yeah.
And,
And thanks for continuing the conversation on death and grief. It's important to have it. So
Yeah. Anytime.
yes.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you.
So, Leah, what'd you think?
I think it was a really great conversation. I learned a lot. I think my biggest takeaway is that this is a people first environment.
Yes.
That she really takes into account the person who they were in their life, and that at their end of life celebration service, however you want to call it, really represents that person.
No, and I think one of the best, or not the best takeaways, but one of the biggest takeaways is you really can do everything that you love, no matter what it looks like. And
Yes.
I think that point at the end that she made, I was just she's doing exactly what she loves in a career she never thought she would be in. And I thought that was really beautiful.
I think I would love to be buried here.
Yeah?
Yeah, I think I want my celebration here, so make sure it happens, Rachel. Today's episode is dedicated to Michelle McNaught, and Erica wrote, "She used to work for us at our old store in the Catskills, and she is the inspiration for our exit party. That is for someone with a terminal illness to have a gathering before they die. She was diagnosed with ovarian cancer just before her 20th birthday and died just after her 21st birthday. Again, we are your Bereavement Babes, Leah and Rachel, and we'll see you on the other side."